Hey, hi and welcome back. So in previous video, I showed you the practical demonstration of capacitor as an energy storage device and capacitor as a filter. Okay. And I hope that till now, whatever you learned, you enjoyed it. Alright. So that being said, now let's start with this video, which is Introduction to Capacitor Part 5. So now let me tell you what you will learn in this video. So the first point is types of capacitor. So there are actually different types of capacitor, but not all the types are actually frequently used. Okay, so I will walk you through the different types and I will show you what types of capacitors are most widely used while designing the hardware. Okay, so all those things we are actually going to discuss in this point. After that, the second point is capacitor packages. So again, capacitors are actually available in different packages, and out of all the available packages, some packages are actually most widely used. Okay, so what are those packages and how they look like? I will discuss all those things in this point. Okay, so this is how basically we are going to cover this video. Now let's start with this video. So now let me show you the different types of capacitors which are actually available in market, and I'm not listing all the different types of capacitor which are available. Out of all the available capacitor, I'm just going to list out only those capacitors which are very frequently used. Okay, so the first one is ceramic capacitor. So this capacitor is actually very frequently used when we design the circuit or when we design the hardware. Then the next type of capacitor is tantalum. Okay, after that the next one is electrolytic, and after that the next one is plastic film, and in the end the last one is supercapacitor. So these are basically 5 different types of capacitors which are actually most widely used when we design the hardware or when we design the circuit. And out of all these 5 capacitor, again the ceramic capacitor, then tantalum capacitor and electrolytic capacitor, these 3 capacitors are actually very widely used or very frequently used when we design the hardware. Now let me show you how exactly this ceramic capacitor, tantalum capacitor and this electrolytic capacitor look like. So these are basically the different types of capacitor. Now I will walk you through each of these capacitors one by one. So the first one is ceramic through-hole. So this is how basically the ceramic through-hole capacitor look like. So no matter what type of capacitor, what type of ceramic capacitor you will use with a through-hole variant, they are actually going to look like this only. Okay, so here actually the color is different. So here it is orange color. You will generally, when you will purchase the ceramic capacitor from the local market, you will actually get the capacitor with a it's going to have a cream color, okay, or yellow color. Okay, so that's basically the ceramic capacitor with a through-hole variant. And after that, this is basically the ceramic capacitor with SMD variant. Okay, we also called this type of or these capacitors as MLCC, which stands for multi-layer ceramic chip capacitor. Okay, so these capacitors we are going to use in our design, and we are not going to use these capacitor although they are ceramic, but they are through-hole variant. Instead of that, we are actually going to use the SMD variant of ceramic capacitor. Okay, so these capacitors actually take less space on the PCB compared to these one. Okay, so these were the ceramic through-hole and SMD capacitor. After that, the next one is electrolytic through-hole capacitor. So this is how basically the electrolytic through-hole capacitor look like. And again, we have used these capacitor in our design, in our hardware. So based on the value of capacitor, the size is going to be different, so which you can observe here. Okay, and these are the terminals of electrolytic through-hole capacitor. Okay, and this is how basically the electrolytic SMD capacitor look like. And again, electrolytic capacitor actually have the polarity, so it's going to have one terminal as positive and another terminal it's going to be negative. In the same way, for SMD electrolytic capacitor, one terminal will be negative and another terminal will be positive. Okay, so you can see here this black sign which actually indicates the negative terminal of this electrolytic SMD capacitor, and this one is the positive terminal. In the same way, in this electrolytic through hole capacitor. This one is negative terminal. Okay, so black marking or this gray marking. So you can see all these marking actually indicates that that's the negative terminal of the capacitor. Okay, and the adjacent terminal, it's going to be the positive terminal of the capacitor. Okay, electrolytic capacitor. And in case of ceramic capacitor, actually, there is no polarity. So you can connect this ceramic capacitor in any direction. Whereas in case of electrolytic capacitor, you have to maintain the polarity. Okay, if you connect the electrolytic capacitor in opposite direction, then you may damage these capacitor or they may also blast. Okay, so always remember that point. So these were the electrolytic through hole and SMD capacitor. After that, the next capacitors are tantalum, through hole and SMD capacitor. So you can see this is how basically the tantalum capacitor look like. And again, in case of tantalum capacitor, there is polarity. So this one is positive terminal and this one is the negative terminal. You will also see the terminal or marking on the capacitor, tantalum capacitor. So this actually indicates this one is positive, this one is positive. So you can see on every capacitor it's given which one is positive terminal. Okay, so this is basically the positive terminal in case of tantalum through hole capacitor. And after that, this is basically the tantalum SMD capacitor. And again, in this tantalum SMD capacitor, there is a polarity. So this one is a positive terminal and this one is negative terminal. So this dash or this marking actually represents the polarity of the tantalum capacitor. Now here I'm not sure why the polarity is not given. I think this is basically the 3D model or animated model. That's the reason the marking is not there. But generally, whenever you will purchase the tantalum capacitor, you will see the marking on the tantalum capacitor, and by identifying the marking, you will get to know which one is positive and which one is negative. Okay, and again, we are not going to use the tantalum capacitor in our design. We are just going to use the electrolytic through hole and MLCC SMD or ceramic SMD capacitor in our design. Okay, but from information point of view, I actually included this particular capacitor as this capacitor is very frequently used. Okay, so we are done with all the three different types of capacitors: ceramic, electrolytic and tantalum. And each of these capacitors have their own significance, and based on the application requirement, we actually use one of the type of capacitor. So I hope that you are now comfortable with all these different types of capacitor and you are now familiar with all these different types of capacitor. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Now here I will show you the different types of packages in which this MLCC or ceramic capacitor, ceramic SMD capacitor comes. So let me show you the different packages now. So you can see here, this is basically the table, and in this table you can see these are the different packages which are available in case of ceramic SMD capacitor, or you can also call it as MLCC capacitors, and these are the dimensions of these SMD capacitor. When we discuss the resistor, SMD resistor, we discussed the packages in case of SMD resistors. Okay, so you will see almost similar packages in case of SMD capacitors also. So you can see here O2, O1, then O4, O2, O6, O3, O8, O5, then 1206. So we discussed all these packages, okay, when we discussed the SMD resistor. And I also told you that these are basically the kind of packages which are most widely used or most frequently used when we design the hardware. And the hardware that we are going to design in this training, all the capacitors that I have used, all the SMD capacitors that I have used, it has got a 0603 package. And when we discuss the SMD resistors, at that time we also discussed the dimensions of SMD resistors. So in the same way, in case of SMD capacitors, you can see here they have actually given the dimension. So for 0603 package, the length is going to be 0.06 inches and the width is going to be 0.03 inches. Okay, and you can see here in this image I have given the comparison for 1206 package, 0805 package, 0603 package and 0402 package. Okay, so I had these capacitors with me, so I took the image, and you can see in this image how exactly or how big the 1206 capacitor is, and how big this 0805 capacitor is in comparison to this 0603 and 0402 capacitor. Okay, and this capacitor we generally don't use, when we do the soldering of hardware manually. I generally avoid these packages, 0402 packages. Most of the time whenever I have to use the capacitors, I will use either 0603 package, 0805 package or 1206 package. Okay, most of the time I am going to use the 0805 or 0603 package. Okay, and I told you about the dimension. So this is basically the length of this capacitor, which is 0.04 inches. So you can see here 0.04 inches. So this one is 0.04 inches and this width is 0.02 inches. Okay, which you can see here 0.02 inches. Okay, so that's all about the different packages in case of SMD capacitor. Now let's see the packages in case of tantalum capacitor. Okay, so you can see these are the different packages for tantalum capacitor, and also I have given the dimensions for these all packages. Okay, so in these packages it's not like some of the packages are very widely used, so it's not like that in case of tantalum capacitor. Whereas in case of MLCC capacitor, we discussed that 0603, then 0805, then 1206, these packages are very widely used, right? But in case of tantalum capacitor, there is nothing like that. It actually depends on the application requirement. So based on the amount of, the amount of space that you have on the PCB, we actually go with one of the type of tantalum capacitor. Okay, and also the price of tantalum capacitor is very big concern. So if the 470 microfarad capacitor, tantalum capacitor is available in different packages, then based on the price we actually make the decision which one or which package will be more suitable for the application. Okay, so in case of tantalum capacitor, the price of tantalum capacitor increases significantly. Okay, so always the price is point of concern when we deal with the tantalum capacitor. Okay, and in this image you can see this one is the positive terminal of this capacitor, and after that this one is the negative terminal of this capacitor. Okay, so that was all about the tantalum capacitor packages, and I hope that everything that we discussed is now clear to you. Okay, now I will see you in the next video, which is Introduction to Capacitor Part 6.